always said
I hate it.
How are you?
No,
Crowded.
I gotta say something else.
I've been calling
Go with the
in
flow.
on the online.
Oh,
'cause
online,
I haven't
yeah.
been here in forever.
Hurricanes.
And school.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone out to our SACIE meeting today, and I'd like to go ahead and call our meeting to order. A motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to begin with the, everyone's not here. We have two new members, Dr. LaRonda Lowry and Miss Alicia Leva. I may not be pronouncing that correctly, but would everyone be in favor if we continue with the agenda till Miss Alicia comes in? She's expected to be here. She may be in traffic. So we can just come back and do the swearing in of our members after she's here. Okay. You have your minutes and our agenda for today. Do you need a moment to look over those before we get a motion to approve our minutes and our agenda?
I make a motion to approve.
Have a motion on the floor to approve approve our agenda and our minutes. Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're also going to, our next item on the agenda is Dr. Oxenine, but she is in another meeting. She's going to be with us shortly. So we're going to come back to that item. We'll move on to Mr. Greg Richardson, our Executive Director. He is with the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs. He's going to give us some updates as it relates to our commission. Mr. Greg.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear. I have a PowerPoint, and I don't know if it's set up. It is loaded. Okay, good. So I'm just going to come over here and we'll walk through it. I like to do the PowerPoints kind of in an informal process. I use this PowerPoint quite often, and so it's a kind of a living presentation that is constantly being updated. And the whole idea of this presentation is to give the audience an overview of the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs and what the work is about, what is involved in our work, and those kind of things at the Commission of Indian Affairs. Before I go into the presentation, though, I want to mention a couple of things to you this morning that is pretty much new, and you might not have heard about this yet, these items that are happening, some as we speak. But most of what I'm going to mention right now is items from our commission meeting last Friday. Last Friday at this very time, we were gearing up our annual meeting of the Commission of Indian Affairs here in Raleigh. And at that meeting, we had a new chairman sworn in, Reverend Ricky Burnett from Robertson County, who's the speaker of the Lumbee tribe, was sworn in as our new chairman. He was appointed as chairman of our commission by Governor Cooper. And he succeeds Fernie Lambert, who had served under the McCoy administration in that capacity as chairman. Also at that meeting, we had an election of officers. Each year at the annual meeting, we elect officers. And your own Dorothy Yates over here, Crow Yates, was elected vice chair of our Commission of Indian Affairs. So give her a round of applause, if you would. Dorothy has been representing the Saponi tribe on our commission for a number of years. She has headed up our education committee for a number of years and has served on SACIE for a number of years, and so she's very qualified to serve in that capacity. Something else has just happened overnight that I think is noteworthy here is that Melissa Singler, a member of the Waccamaw Siouan Indian tribe in Columbus County, has been elected as the president of Robertson Community College. And of course, that action has to be sanctioned by the State Community College Board but at this time, she is the person who has been selected to lead Robertson Community College. She, from what I understand from her background and looking over her resume, has a stellar background in community college work for a number of years and was highly recommended for that position. So we're glad to see her in that position, not only for her qualifications, but American Indian woman being in that position. And also, it's my understanding that she is the second American Indian to serve in that position. So I think we're doing great in North Carolina with the educational attainment and getting our people prepared to where they can serve in these capacities. And I think, that speaks well for not only for our American Indian communities, but also for our state. I say many times that I would challenge anyone to bring forth any other state in the nation that has the people in key positions like we have. I know a number of other states have worked in the area of Indian education, but I don't know of another state that has the impact of North Carolina, that has a state advisory council on Indian education, state advisory council that is statutory, that's in law in North Carolina, and that gives us an opportunity to do some great work, and that's why I think we have all these and many other accomplishments going forth in our state. Some of the things that we're working on, I want to call your attention to the 2020 census, a very important item. There's work to be done in our schools and our communities and with our tribal leaders and making sure that our people are prepared for the 2020 census, and on April 1st, 2020, that they actually go out there and fill out the census form. And this is a personal comment from me. When you fill out the census form, there's a place on there for you to identify yourself as an American Indian and your tribe. I would encourage you to do that. There's also about 16 other categories. You can be American Indian in several other categories. But we're one of the smallest populations in the state. And we always encourage people to check American Indian alone. That helps us get good concrete numbers. When we check these other boxes, that means our population is watered down and our impact is less. We are working right now on Indian Heritage Month for 2019. The celebration will be held up the street here at the Museum of History. I believe the date is November the 23rd. It is the largest event at the Museum of History for the museum. So I encourage you to talk about that in the communities and to participate in that. Voter registration. We're working with the Board of Elections in the state. They were one of our presenters at the commission meeting last Friday. And so there's a number of things that we know about our population in North Carolina. We have Robertson County, which is one of the strongest counties in the state as far as voter registration. Of course, Robertson County has the largest American Indian population, so that's part of the reason you have that. But more than that, Robertson County has had a long-standing track record of engagement in the political process. We have judges there, we have county commissioners, we have school board members, and I could go on and on and on. Some of our other communities, we haven't got there yet, but we're working in that direction. So we encourage that type of engagement in the political process. We do not encourage or speak to anyone about their affiliation, their political affiliation rather, but we encourage people to actually register and vote. That's one way that we can be recognized as a people in the state. And then finally, on the updates from the commission meeting, a 7-year span of work dealing with the Tuscarora petition for state recognition. That petition has been reviewed over that period of time by the recognition committee. And the recommendation of that committee last Friday was that the Tuscarora did not meet the requirements to become a state-recognized tribe in North Carolina. So that is the official position of the commission, And that information will be released shortly publicly, and the notice will be going out to the Tuscarora today. So I'm going to scoot right on through the presentation, and I encourage you to stop me at any point if you have a question about any of this material. The idea here is to give you a snapshot of the Commission of Indian Affairs and the work that we do. And we're operating under the statutes of North Carolina, General Statute 143B through 404. And according to the 2010 census, we had a population of 122,000 in our state as far as our numbers. We also have numbers showing that we go up to 183,000 if we count American Indian in combination with other populations. The statutory purposes are quite general, gives us broad and general authority to do things in North Carolina, to deal effectively and fairly with Indian affairs, to bring state and local resources into the state, to provide aid and protection, prevent hardships, to educate state citizens about American Indians. And we do that through a number of different processes in North Carolina, and we're going to talk about some of those briefly today. Next. There are 30 members of our commission, 31 Indian members. By statute, each of our tribes and organizations in North Carolina that hold seats on the commission has representation on the committees, on the commission. So it's 31 Indian members, 5 state officials, 2 members appointed by the General Assembly, and 2 ex-official youth members. Next. And in North Carolina, we have 8 tribes that are statutory, and the tribes are listed there on the left: the Coharie, Eastern Band of Cherokee, Halawa-Saponi, Saponi, Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina, Meherrin, Waccamaw, and Occaneecha Band of Saponi. And off to the right, you've got basically the geographic areas of those counties, now, or those tribes. Now, I mentioned the 2020 census, and here lies the reason why we need to make sure we get people counted. These geographic counties is where the bulk of the population would be located. So when the census folks come out, we want to make sure that our people are counted in those areas, because the numbers dictate funding for Indian education, WIOA funding, Indian housing funds, and many other funding opportunities, not to say our representation in the General Assembly and in Congress. And in North Carolina, we have a unique place at the table for urban Indians in our state. So we have seats on our commission for the Cumberland County Association for Indian People, Guilford Native American Association, Metrolina Native American Association, and Triangle Native American Association. Apologize for my voice here. My sinuses are really kicking up this time of the year. Here's a snapshot, a map of North Carolina. You've seen this before. I think it's used quite widely in the state of North Carolina, which gives us a portrait of where American Indians live in our state. And so, as you see, the majority of our population is right pretty much through the center of our state. State-recognized tribes in North Carolina. Again, there are 8 tribes, and you can go to the source for that information is Chapter 71A in the General Statutes of North Carolina. Federally recognized tribes in the United States, there are 573 federally recognized tribes, and 6 of those were recently recognized in Virginia, just within the last 3 years. There's 1 federally recognized tribe in North Carolina holding that full status. It's the Eastern Band of Cherokee. However, Lumbee also carries that status under the 1956 Act, the Lumbee Act of 1956. Examples of resources available to our tribes and Indian organizations: of course, the General Assembly, state programs and services, federal programs, foundation funding, and many other sources of funding. Things to know about American Indians. Of course, you all know, I'm sure, just about everything I'm mentioning here, but when we talk to non-Indian groups, just about every time the audience is pretty much fascinated by this information because they haven't heard this information before. They have not been exposed to this information before. I just gave this presentation up at UNC Asheville about 3 weeks ago to a student group, the Indian education group there on campus, and they were just amazed. Since that meeting, I've been receiving emails. They want a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, and they want to bring it back because they want to talk about some of these things, in particular right here, when we're talking about the status, legal categories of American Indians. Of course, there are three: state-recognized Indians, federally recognized Indians, and the non-recognized Indians. Non-recognized Indian tribes are kind of like a community that you might know about in your community. When Halawassaponi came here today, they went through a little town called Centerville. Been there for generations. There's a fire department there. There's a community there. People live there. But they do not have a mayor. They do not receive funding from the General Assembly. They do not receive funding from the county itself because they're not a township. They're not a legal entity. And so non-recognized tribes kind of fall into that category. However, where it's different is that a lot of the non-federally recognized tribes are non-profits. They own a non-profit. They operate under a 50c3, and they can get grants and scholarships and bring many other services into the community. That would be a true example of what the Tuscarora has been doing. Over the years, Tuscarora have received some grants through A&A and some other resources to do some things in their community. But that's totally different from Lumbee or Halawassaponi or Eastern Band of Cherokee, where they have this distinct state-recognized status where they're eligible to receive distinct set-aside funding set aside by the U.S. Congress for Indian tribes in their communities. Okay. Enrollment criteria. We get a lot of questions about enrollment, and there's discussions going on, I think, in every tribal community about tribal enrollment. American Indians can be enrolled in the state or federally recognized tribes, but tribes determine tribal enrollment. Now, this is a critical thing that we get into at the commission. People will call and say, you know, I've been to Halawassaponi, and they're upset. Halawassaponi, I'll talk about my tribe because I can, but they're upset because the tribal council or the tribe didn't issue a tribal enrollment card. So they're wanting to call me, thinking that we have some oversight over that. They'll say, well, you know, I've submitted my application, but they tell me I'm not eligible. Why? The only thing that I can say at the commission is that you have to go back to the tribe. The Commission of Indian Affairs, the governor, nor the president or the General Assembly or the U.S. Congress has any authority over tribal enrollment. So people get mad with me and say, well, I'm going to call the governor, or get mad with me and say, I'm going to call the president. And I'll just diplomatically tell them that, you know, that's their right. And, you know, if they want to call me back later to talk about it, please call me back. I know what the answer is going to be if I don't tell them that. State and federal government agencies have no jurisdiction over tribal enrollment. So, you know, if the FBI or U.S. Justice Department has an issue with that, the process goes right back to that tribal enrollment office at Lumbee or Halawassaponi, Waccamasu, on Eastern Band of Cherokee, Navajo, whatever the case might be. None of the agencies in government have any authority over tribal enrollment. Tribal sovereignty. Indian tribes are sovereign. They determine their own government, membership, and geographic area. Remember those counties out beside the tribes that was on the slide before? Well, tribes have determined that that's the county jurisdiction. Some tribes have expanded that. Lumbee, for example, expanded that in the 2010 census. Lumbee now includes Cumberland County. Tribes also can purchase additional properties, which expands that territory, that area. So every time the census is taken, then the tribe has to work with the Census Bureau, and that's what we've been doing over the last year, working with the Census Bureau to make sure that in Lumbee, those new housing units that are being built and those new areas that are being incorporated into the Lumbee structure will be part of the 2020 census. Eastern Band of Cherokee purchased some land recently off of Interstate 40, just inside of the Tennessee border. Well, that land in 2010 was not part of the Eastern Band jurisdiction, but in 2020 it will be because they've incorporated that with the census work. Federal government and Indian tribes. The federal government grants recognition for federally recognized tribes. Federal government has jurisdiction over many aspects of federally recognized tribes, but not all aspects. The federal government and the U.S. Department of Interior has oversight of Indian lands held in trust. That's a whole different category. Held in trust, that's a legal category of land in trust. So the federal government covers that. General Assembly and North Carolina Indians. General Assembly establishes legislation associated with state-recognized tribes. Chapter 71A, I've already mentioned that. That chapter in the general statutes outline the state-recognized tribes in North Carolina. It gives you point by point who they are, where they're located, et cetera, et cetera. General Statute 143B defines the work of the Commission of Indian Affairs and the authority of the Commission of Indian Affairs, which was referenced earlier. There's one American Indian in the North Carolina General Assembly, Representative Charles Graham, a member of the Lumbee tribe. The General Assembly grants state recognition to tribes after the Commission of Indian Affairs completes its process of review. Examples of legislation that impact American Indians in North Carolina. Indian gaming, you've all heard about the Cherokee casino. Well, there has to be a compact entered into, even though they're federally recognized and the state really has no authority over that. The Indian Gaming Regulatory Commission requires that each tribe that's going to do gaming in a state must have an agreement with the state, and that's a gaming compact. Commission of Indian Affairs, mentioned the legislation that created the Commission of Indian Affairs. State recognition of Indian tribes. I mentioned the statute that authorizes the Indian Commission to review petitions for state recognition. The Indian Housing Authority. This is a unique piece of legislation in North Carolina. You won't find many other states in the union that has a statute that sets aside a provision for an Indian Housing Authority. I think there's one in Alabama or down in the lower 48 states of Mississippi. There's one other one, but North Carolina is the only other one. And then your council, State Advisory Council on Indian Education, of course, dictates the fact that you have these meetings, provides an opportunity for you to be appointed to serve on this council, provides an opportunity for you to prepare an annual report that breaks out good data, achievement data for American Indian students. On the federal side, Indian education. I think in your agenda today, I saw some material where you're going to be talking about the 17 or 18 Indian education programs in our state. Gwen Locklear over here, she's representing one of those, and does a good job, Gwen, in Wake County. Yeah, we teamed up on some presentations in many areas, and she has a long-standing history in that. Something new now is Indian child welfare. We're really concerned about our babies being stolen from us, legally stolen from us in our state with statutes. And so we've been able to get a little money from the General Assembly to kind of investigate this. So what we're trying to do with that, we have put a staff person in place to do some training, try to encourage American Indians to become foster care parents, because when those children end up in the system and the Child and Family Services decide, well, they're going to terminate parental rights, we have to have American Indians who are ready and willing and able to then become a foster care parent. Otherwise, that child's going to be just put out there in the public and away from their community. So we're in our third year with that right now. We have more American Indian foster care parents in our state now than ever. And if you're wanting to know more about that, if you know someone who wants to become a foster care parent, please let us know, because we need so many more. Because in some of our tribal communities, there's not a single American Indian foster care parent. So if there's a child that ends up in foster care in the courts, they're going to be basically placed out there with a non-Indian family, in many cases outside of the community. And of course, the first important thing about that whole scenario is to make sure that the best interest of that child is taken care of. But we really don't want a child to be placed outside of the community, outside of their family network, and not have any exposure forever and a day after that to their culture or to their family. I will get calls at the office from people who've been in that situation. They are now in their 20s and 30s and 40s and just own and own and own. And it's a sad scenario, because after they've been out there for so long, chances are they're not on the tribal roll. Then they're not eligible for any tribal services. They have no connectivity with their community. Basically, there's a gap in terms of their heritage and their cultures. State recognition, statutory, as I mentioned before. And the commission has developed these procedures that guide that process, and it authorizes the commission to administer those procedures and come to a final ruling, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago regarding the Tuscarora decision. State recognition, mentioned that geographic area again. You know, if we're not getting good data from the census, it's going to impact our Indian education, employment, economic development, and many other things in our communities. Tribes elect members to the commission. This is very distinct. There's a number of other Indian commissions in the United States, but in some cases, in fact, most cases, the members that I mentioned earlier, the 21 Indian members that serve on our commission, they are appointed by the governor, legislature, or some other political entity. Here in North Carolina, our tribes appoint those members or elect those members. So our tribes have total control of that. Extend authority to tribes to compete for state and federal set-aside programs. And it enhances a government-to-government relationship with our tribes and the state. Examples of legislation, burial remains. Or just 3 weeks ago, I had to deal with this one. Western Carolina, they're expanding. There's a parking lot being put in place. So the backhoe doing trench work hit a burial, unmarked burial. Well, thanks to work that was done many, many years ago with the Indian Commission, there's legislation in place that dictate what will happen in relation to a discovery like that. The law requires the coroner to be notified, the sheriff's department to be notified. It requires the chief archaeologist across the street over here to be notified. It requires the Indian Commission to be notified, and it requires that a report be issued regarding that discovery. So all of that's spelled out in Chapter 70 of the General Statute, and it's a felony, basically, to not adhere to these policies in North Carolina. So got that in place because we don't want people going out digging up graves looking for pottery and looking for jewelry. That's heinous, but it happens. Next. So we're getting down to the end here. These are some of the core programs that are funded specifically for Indians through the U.S. Congress. U.S. Department of Labor funds the Workforce Program, WIOA, we call it now, Administration for Native Americans. We've all heard about the Indian Housing Program, and of course the big one, Indian Education. Okay, programs administered by the Commission pretty much mirrors those programs that I've already mentioned. Next. And of course, this gets into the fun part, and I know I'm out of time, Chairman. But I always, in closing, this is where we really had a good time with the students up at Asheville because we get them involved. And I know you as educators, you run into some of this. You know, there's often a discussion about should we be referring to ourselves as American Indians or Native Americans. And that comes up all the time. We got our commission meeting last Friday at about 3 o'clock, walked out in the parking lot loading up supplies in the van, and a gentleman who was with another group in the building, elder fellow, he came up to me and he says, "Why do you call yourselves American Indians?" Real authoritative, you know. There was this non-Indian guy talking to me. "Why do you call yourself American Indians? You all are not American Indians." I said, what authority references have you consulted to come up with that? He says, well, Columbus referred to you all as American Indians, and he was lost. I said, we understand that. I said, but do you also understand that everyone born in America is a Native American? Mm-hmm. Everyone born in America is not an American Indian. And sure, Columbus put that label on us, but we've got hundreds of years of history and statutes, executive orders, and on with the word American Indian in there. So now if we go and try to start changing all that, then 100 years from now, will those future leaders and people and our families forget about who we were? So we lose that connectivity. So he kind of got a quick education in terms of why we use American Indian right quick there. So you see that coming up quite a bit. You refer to American Indian You refer to them as American Indian, of course, but it's always in the context of who you're conversing with, you know. You know, a lot of us use Native American, a lot of us use American Indian, so we have to be conscious of that. But, you know, looking at history, which one is better to use, I think you get the picture. Is it appropriate to refer to Greg Richardson as chief? Well, I'm not an elected chief. I've never been elected chief, so would it be appropriate? Now, I've got some non-Indian friends that do that, and they'll say, hey, chief, how you doing? You know, I'll let a few people get away with that, but if I don't know them that well, I'll start getting into that corrective mode real quick, so I'm not an elected chief. Is it appropriate to use American Indian mascots, costumes? You know the answer, and this body has adopted some procedures. Y'all have made a recommendation to the state board about these mascots, and we still have some schools, systems in the state a few left. I think when we started out this process over 20 years ago, there were over 60 some schools in North Carolina that had some type of mascot within their structure. And now it's my understanding they've been reduced to around 30, so we still have work to do. And do we refer to American Indians as women as Pocahontas? And of course, you know the answer to that. No, that's not appropriate. And so when we get into especially discussions with non-Indians, we get a lot of good discussions about this. And my meeting with UNC Asheville 3 weeks ago, they had a person in there who was challenging that course by sitting in the course, and they'll certainly get some grade for that, I guess. But she has emailed me, and she has taken on a project on her own in the city of Asheville to work to be an advocate and to educate other citizens in the city of Asheville about American Indians based on the conversation that we had at UNC Asheville 3 weeks ago. So that's kind of, you know, what we do. That's a snapshot of our commission. I know I went over time, and I do apologize for that, but hopefully you've got some, you know, perspective on what we run into as a commission, employees of the commission, and as tribal leaders often run into when you're conducting your business, and I'm sure you run into that quite frequently as Indian educators. So thank you for this opportunity, Chairman. And are there any questions, I guess, at this point?
I'd just like to add, Mr. Richardson, that we have changed in our county our Native American Student Association to the American Indian Student Association for that very reason, because there was a situation where this individual, they had requested that there be a Native American on a committee, and the person that was placed on there was an American Indian, but they were a Native American. So when they came back and addressed it, the individual said, "You requested we have a Native American." And exactly what you said is what the person said. Anyone who's born in the United States is a Native American, so we fulfilled that requirement. So we have to make sure that we use the correct terminology, and if we don't, then individuals will not have a seat at the table. And that's why we are making an effort to ensure that we're saying American Indian, so there's no ambiguity in knowing that we are the people that we're referring to.
Right. Thank you for doing that too. I was reading a report in DOA just a matter of 2 weeks ago, and it's in its final stage. I was reading through that report. It's prepared by the HUB office, Historically Underutilized Business Office. And throughout the document, in one respect, when you're reading along, they're referring to us as Native American. In next paragraph, they're referring to us as American Indians. But there's nothing within the document that said that, you know, oftentimes American Indians are referred to as Native American or American Indian. So the reader would have to, you know, from that reading of the whole document, determine really, well, who are the Native Americans and who are the American Indians? So I think that's a very important point that you're making. Mm-hmm. So thank you all.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Do you want to do this one? Go ahead.
Thank everyone. To Miss LaRonda, I think she's the only one who doesn't know me. I'm Dr. Susan Silver. the liaison to SACIE. I'm not Dr. Beverly Emery, but she is out of town, so I will briefly just share a few things with you regarding her work. Dr. Beverly Emery is moving into the role of Dr. Maria Petrie Martin, who worked very closely with this board, and you all had such an affinity for. She moved on to be a superintendent in Virginia. Dr. Emery has taken her place. Her previous role was as superintendent of Winston-Salem Forsyth School, so she has a lot of practical experience in that arena, and she came on board with us in May, James? Was it May? Yes, back in May. So we're still getting settled. The biggest developments in the particular area that she manages are our regional case management structure, which Dr. Maria Petrie Martin set into place and was getting into place. Those are finally getting settled. So we have a regional case management structure, which means we have 8 people who are called regional case managers, and they basically manage things for that region. It's their job to look at data and determine needs based on needs that we see across the region. It is no secret that DPI has had significant cuts in staff, which necessitated a move to this structure. We previously had coaches who could go in and work one-to-one with identified schools. It's a luxury we no longer have. So we're moving to that regional case structure so we can provide more services from that regional level. With that comes a regional support team structure. So those regional case managers each manage a team of people who represent various works throughout the agency. So that might be exceptional children's, it might be CTE, career technical education, all those different areas. And those people sit on a team that meets with that regional case manager to help inform needs and tell them what's going on with those. So that's the primary, one of the primary functions of the agency right now. You may hear about something called a catalog of services, particularly if you're directly in the education system. Again, that's something that the agency developed due to losing some human capacity. Developed that so that schools could see, here's what the agency offers, so that they could then select from that menu to determine what their needs are. That's going to roll out in October. There will be some adjustments to that based on some rulings we expect to come down related to Leandro. As some of you might be familiar with Leandro legislation from years ago. We'll talk more about that once more comes down for those of you who may not be familiar. But that's what I wanted to share on behalf of Dr. Emery. I'm sure she'll be joining us at our next meeting. But she is very excited about the work and sent out a congratulations to our newest members and regrets that she can't be here. But just wanted to share. On a housekeeping note, before I introduce James, I'd like to say these meetings are being streamed on YouTube now so that folks can listen in. So if you can make sure you use your mic. And also we're going to play those back to help with our minutes. So if when you make a motion, if you could say, I'm Susan Silver and I make a motion that, just so we can make sure we capture everything, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Silver. Now you're going to introduce our next speaker.
So I'll stay up here and I'm going to introduce Dr. James Ellerby. Dr. James Ellerby is not new to the department, but he is new to this role. I previously worked with him in district and regional support, which is the unit that I'm in. Our primary work is to support identified schools and districts, previously it was, who were underperforming. That's still my team's role. We work with those schools in need of the most critical support. But Dr. Ellerby previously worked with us on that. He's been in school improvement and school turnaround for a long time. I won't say how long. I've been here since 2007, so that tells you how long. He came on shortly after that. But currently, he's here with us today to talk about the Innovative School District. And I'm just going to give a quick background for those who have been in and out of meetings, or maybe this is your first meeting. So the Innovative School District, and James will certainly tell you more, was determined to support schools that historically not been performing. The reason why this is relevant to SACIE is because the first school that was selected to be part of the Innovative School District is located in Robeson County, and that is Southside Ashpole Elementary. So the state went in and developed a collaborative relationship to work with them that is now called the Innovative School District. So James is going to update you today about what's been happening with that and just give you a little bit more information about ISD in general that I couldn't possibly know. So come on up, James.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am James Ellerby, Superintendent of the Innovative School District, and it's I'm really happy to be with the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. I want to thank Mr. Richardson as well, because that overview gave me a real good background in what this committee is all about. And thank Dr. Silver for introducing me and as well inviting me to come and be a part of this. As you know, the first school for the Innovative School District, which our whole goal is to provide equity and opportunities for those schools that have been underachieving for quite a period of time. And so Southside Ashpole was the first school admitted, or is the first school admitted until the ISD. I'd just like to give you a couple of updates of what's been going on. I started July the 15th as the new superintendent of the Innovative School District. We also had leadership change in our Innovative School Operator, which is AAC, All Academic for All Children. Achievement for All School Children, is the name of the organization that is the Innovative School Operator for Southside Ashpole. We also had a change in leadership at the school, or the school director, better known as a principal, and Dr. Kenneth Bowen, who has a track record of being a turnaround leader and getting schools to perform and building the capacity with the teachers and providing feedback and support in order to set that positive culture and climate that is conducive for teaching and learning. And so we have been on a mission to make sure that we are aligned with our services and support. The first thing that we target is leadership itself, which I told you about the leadership changes, but the next thing was in curriculum, making sure that our curriculum is aligned to incorporate all the North Carolina standard course of study, so that these students have a very great opportunity of doing well on the assessments that will be given to them at the end of the school year. We're doing a better job of progress monitoring of what's going on by setting up systems, protocols, and procedures so that we are in constant communication and collaboration about our efforts towards our goals and the tasks that we have all been assigned to do in this process. We are doing currently evaluations that were not done last year, and we like to take our evaluations in the term of coaching feedback, because a lot of times teachers just want to receive feedback on how well they're doing in the classrooms and areas where they possibly can grow. And we're using data to drive those conversations and give feedback. And of course, the North Carolina educational evaluation system is being utilized as the tool to guide that. We're also doing a lot of things in school community engagements. We have been down there. We had a block party for the opening of school, which there was a huge turnout. There's a lot of YouTube videos and different things out about some of the community engagement pieces that we've had, met with the town leaders, as well as some of the faith-based communities, and bringing all of those resources together to make sure that parents and the community are well informed of what we're doing in the school and how they can participate. And when we're working very hard to provide additional resources, again, to target those, the equity and the opportunities for these kids to be exposed to things that they are not necessarily exposed to by being in a small town. We are doing field trips and other things that we can open it up and allow them to experience new things, whether it's virtually or actually going to some of those things. So that's an update of what we're doing in the school. And we do have populations that are American Indian, and I want to be correct with my terminology, so I'm learning those things. So again, thank you for the presentation, so that I can be very careful with the terminology that is being used. And we definitely welcome any advice from Dr. Silver and your committee that would better help us serve all students in the area. I've met some Locklears at the school, and then I learned today that your board chair had 2 children to actually go through Southside Ashpole. So partnership and collaboration and working together are some key things that I enjoy and always strive to do in every aspect of my work. So if there's ever any advice that you can give, Me as the superintendent of the Innovative School District, to better support all students and especially American Indians, I am open and welcome to that advice.
How many students are in the school?
There are currently 215 students, yes.
Approximately 100 of those students or more are American Indian and have a 506, because I have a consortium agreement. I have a consortium agreement with them, and I have the majority of that population is American Indian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? And
Any more questions?
I'm interested just to find out because it's just taken over this year, correct? This is the first
No,
year?
this is their
this
Second
is
year.
its second year, yes.
What was the turnover with, I teach, so I'm interested in the teacher aspect of it. What was the turnover in your teacher? Was there a lot of turnover in your teachers when you guys came in and took over?
Yes, and I guess I can try to qualify the a lot in that approximately 50% of the
Okay.
teaching staff, there was a turnover.
New teachers.
That's right.
Gotcha.
And highly effective teachers were added based upon EVOS data and their background.
Okay. Just wondering. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Question, Angela Richardson, Halifax County. What about the class size? Did the class size increase or decrease within this concept?
So the class sizes vary because we do have from the kindergarten all the way up. So the kindergarten class size is a little bit smaller, but I think on average that this class size is between 20, 24, 25 students. I've worked in the Halifax area before too. Where was the school I worked with? Charter school? Yes, in Halifax, yes. Any other questions?
Could you
Concerns?
see, was there a significant difference in, because I know test scores just came out.
Yes, ma'am.
Was there a significant difference in test scores after the first year? Did you see any difference for the first year?
I would not say significant. The performance grade only improved by 1 point. However, there was a significant improvement in mathematics,
Right.
and some of the areas that we didn't have the improvements, there were two contributors. One is making sure the entire curriculum is integrated, and two was the adult that was teaching. And so with those changes that we made, I'm pretty sure we're going to get much more favorable results, significantly increasing our scores. Very good question.
Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, Dr. Oxendine.
Any more questions or comments for Dr. Ellerby?
I would just like to make a comment. I know you said your teacher turnover was at 50%. I do commend you on taking the approach of evaluating and offering your feedback through coaching rather than that evaluative perspective. And I think you'll see some growth if you continue to offer that feedback as a coach and an instructional leader.
Thank you. Yes. And it would be consistent because I'm taking Dr. Boring through the process to actually model, but he is a highly competent, and Dr. Oxendine knows Dr. Boring, actually taught him at Pembroke, but he is a very good coach and providing ongoing feedback, so it will be better this year.
Any more questions or comments?
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Ellerby.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Silver, do you know if Miss Alicia is coming, or should we go ahead and do ours? Okay. We will want to welcome Dr. Oxendine with us. And what we would like to do now is go ahead and go back to our agenda and have our swearing in of our new members. We were trying to wait for Miss Alicia, but she hasn't come in, so we're going to go ahead and swear in Dr. LaRonda Lowry. Dr. Oxendine. This is a very special moment for me because Dr. Lowry started as a first-year teacher, and I helped mentor this young lady, so that tells you my age. And then I also had the pleasure to serve on her dissertation committee, so this is an honor for me to stand with her. And seeing all of these individuals come in, knowing I'm going off, I know SACIE's going to be in great hands. So what we're going to do now is we're going to allow, just for the sake of time, instead of me reading and her repeating, we're just going to allow Dr. Lowry to read this, and then we will give her the, as the church says, the right hand of fellowship.
Okay. I, LaRonda Lowry, do solemnly swear that I will support and maintain the Constitution and laws of the United States, and that I will faithfully discharge my duties as a member of North Carolina State Advisory Council on Indian Education. I will, to the best of my ability, advise the SBE on effective educational practices for American Indian students, explore programs that raise academic achievement and graduation rates among American Indian students, advise the State Board of Education and the Department of Public Instruction on ways to improve coordination and communication for the benefit of American Indian students affected by state and federal programs administered at the state level. Prepare and present an annual report to the State Board of Education, tribal organizations, and to conferees at the annual North Carolina Indian Unity Conference, and advise the SBE on any other aspect of American Indian education requested by the State Board, educators, parents, students, business leaders, and other constituents.
Congratulations, Dr. Lowry. For the sign.
Okay.
You see, wait a minute. One in by another. Okay, Dr. Arsenano, sign here.
And I'll sign here.
Here, go ahead. I think I sign under you. Something, something. Go ahead, Tom. You tell them.
So I am appointed by the North Carolina Community College System. So I started as a high school math teacher back in 1998 at Purnell Sweat High School. Taught there for 3 years, and then kind of made my transition to the community college system. I taught at Fayetteville Tech for a year, and then started at Robinson Community College, and that's where I've been since that time. I currently serve as the program director for math and science at the college, and the community college system at the present moment is kind of transitioning from kind of a prereq model for education to a co-rec. So I work very closely with the community college system. We're calling it RISE, but really working with the community college system for this transition. And really the goal is to get more of our students through that gateway math course and English course within the first 2 years. I also work with the community college system with SURGE, which is bringing some of that kind of what we would consider remedial, but making sure that high school students are college ready so that when they get to the community college, they can go right into the gateway course. So at the community college level, I am really involved with their works of making sure that students, all students, get into that gateway course and they are successful. And we know if they can successfully pass that gateway math course or English course, then they're more likely to graduate.
Thank you, Dr. Lowry, and we're so happy to have you. Thank you. Now we're going to go back and have Dr. Olivia Oxendine, our state board member, and she is going to take this time to give us some updates from the state board. Thank you, Dr. Oxendine, for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear, and thank you, members of SACIE. It's good to be with you today on this Friday glorious morning. I can't think of a better way to spend a fall fall morning than with Native American people to talk about education and to talk about the progress of our kids in our 115 school systems. However, all of our American Indians do not populate all of those school systems, but the State Board of Education does care about the education of American Indian students, and I'm very privileged to be an advocate for American Indian students and American Indian people, American Indian communities in general in my service on the State Board of Education. I have served on the State Board of Education since 2013. I'm the fourth American Indian to serve in this capacity, and if you have a few minutes today to browse around the room, then you can go to the back wall. You see the wall that says State Board of Education members? Then over to the right, that is a continuation of those who have served on the state board. So you can go back there and you can, I'll be proven right because you'll see, you will see the names of American Indians members who have served. So I'm very, very, very honored to have to serve in that capacity, and really honored to serve for many, many years in public education because I've been doing this a very long time. The State Board of Education is extremely busy. I chair what is called the Educator Standards and Practices Committee of the board, and that particular committee is responsible for everything licensure, everything teacher education, everything school psychology, school counseling, school nursing, any personnel that interfaces with kids in our public school system. And that personnel requires, or members of employees in that personnel category, requires a license. That comes under the committee that I chair. So it's extremely busy. We deal with things like back in, I suppose it was last spring, there was a major controversy around the state about the math licensure exam that our teachers had to take in order to receive a license. It was the K-6, the elementary, and the special education licensing exam. It's the Pearson exam. I don't know the exact number or name of the exam, but it was just giving our students in our EPPs, our schools and colleges of education, tremendous problems, and it was mainly because the test itself isn't aligned with the expectations of standards in teaching in K-6 and special education. So we went back and forth for seems like forever and a day until we finally resolved it. And the way we resolved it was to approve a second test, a second licensure test. So students in our EPP's educator preparation programs, also known as our schools and colleges of education, they have a choice. They can take the Pearson exam or they can take the ETS praxis in mathematics. So that's just a taste. I mean, that's just an appetizer of the things that go on. Then we have several other committees. Mine is not the only one. We have a committee that deals with business school operations, and that's all about money. We have a committee that deals with charter schools and innovative programs, and you just had an update on our only ISD in North Carolina at Southside Ashpole. So that comes under another committee, not my committee, but another committee. And then we also have a major committee which is called Student Learning and Achievement, the SLA committee. So it's not just the state board. The state board is then comprised of like subcommittees, if you will. I love the service. I really do. I won't be on it forever and a day. It's a long appointment. It's 8 years, but I thoroughly have enjoyed it. I want to make you aware of this is a rather new initiative, and Dr. Silver can provide you a bit more detail on this initiative at a later time. But we do have what are called region and district support teams around the state. We have these teams located in 8 regions, and I'll just talk with you for a minute off my notes. We have a team that works in the North Central region. We have a team that works out of, when I say works, they're really based out of Raleigh, but they're day to day, their work is in the field, working with school systems, working with schools, but mainly with school districts, central offices. We have a team in the northeast part of the state, and I'm going to try and think. Northeast would be, what would be our counties? Dare, Pitt, Hertford, Jawan. So if you're familiar, if you're from any of those counties, then you would, and many more, you would, this would be your team. We have a team in the northeast, the northwest, and that would be Boone. It would be, I suppose, let's see, Rowan, Salisbury. It wouldn't be Charlotte, but it would be in the north, up in the northwest of the state. We have another team that works the Piedmont, and that would be like Anson County. It would be like Charlotte, Meck. It would be, I think that would take in Rowan. We have another team that is the Sandhills, rah, 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 that's my, I represent the Sandhills on the State Board of Education. And that would be Cumberland, that would be Robinson, that would be Scotland, that would be Hoke, that would be Moore County, Montgomery County, Whiteville City, Columbus County, and Bladen. And I think probably maybe Fort Bragg fits in there. Okay, moving right along. We have another team that works in the southeast. We have a team that works in the southwest. And we also have a team that works the far western part of North Carolina. And that would take care of the Qualla Boundary, the eastern band of Cherokee. That would take care of like Graham County, Swain County, Jackson County, just way far. Murphy, way far to the west. So I share that with you, and I would like for Dr. Silver to maybe send you a little bit more information on these teams to tell you exactly what they do, how they service the schools, and how they serve the LEAs. Because they're really, I'm telling you, the Sandhills team has camped out in Robeson County for about 4 months, helping the system consolidate, and they've gone through a major consolidation and closure of schools. And the team out of Raleigh that works the Sandhills has, I mean, the partnership with Dr. Wooten and her staff in the central office has just been phenomenal. So there we go. Perfect. So, and then Dr. Silver can provide you also with a handout that I'm speaking from. So why am I sharing that with you? So when you get back in your districts, in your schools, and you can say, hey, if we need some help PD in our schools, I know where we can go get it through these teams. So just to make you aware of that. Oh yes, I love it, the map. Any questions of me about the State Board of Education and the work we do? We love your report. It usually comes to us in the spring of the year, about April. And maybe it comes in March for discussion and final approval in April. The board members pay attention to it. They ask questions. The presentation is as slick as it gets. Dr. Locklear and Dr. Silver do a great job with the presentation. So you know that particular report is mandated and legislated in the legislation that created SACIE, that goes back many, 1988, I suppose. So the board is very supportive of the work of the SACIE, and we take you seriously. We take your advice seriously. So feel free to call on us, and feel free to come to our meetings. We meet once a month, the first Wednesday and Thursday of the month. So we'd love to see you out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxon. I'd like to say that I serve on PEPS, and there has been a great deal of work with the State Board and with these additional committees as it relates to licensure. It's been a lot. So, Dr. Silver?
Dr. Locklear. Dr. Oxon, we must be on the same page today. On behalf of Dr. Emery, I was sharing about the regional case managers and the regional support structure. And what I can share with you all is the regional case manager. So each one of those districts you see has a regional case manager who works in our unit. So we work alongside them. I can shoot out to you their names. So that would be the point of contact for that region. And then they would help work with that team to identify those needs that I was talking about earlier. Dr. Osuna, could you briefly speak to any updates on the equity goal from the State Board?
Oh, the equity goal is extremely important, and it became part of our strategic plan last year. And it is going to force the State Board of Education to pay attention to equity in all ways, in hiring, in employment, but also in making sure that our students, our American Indian students, receive what they deserve in terms of the best education possible, the best support services possible, ancillary services, anything that we can do to shore up and even make our parents and our communities aware of this goal. And for the State Board of Education to not just talk about equity as a word, as a noun that shows in a paragraph or in a sentence or in a, in some kind of, I suppose what I'm saying, some kind of buried way. We're making sure that in all of our initiatives, in our strategic plan, in our documents, in our logos, that the word equity, as well as whole child and equity appear. So anytime a word like equity rises to the occasion, so it's prominent and the public sees it, and we give more than lip service to it, that means a lot for a State Board of Education to step forward and to think about policy and practices and dollars and resources committed to the concept of equity. Very proud of that.
I have a question. Does the State Board of Education deal with like teacher ratio with students in classrooms? Like we have, I have a situation where my kid goes to elementary school in Pleasant Garden and he's in 4th grade, and they have like 32 students to one teacher, 33 students to one teacher, and then 33, like they split up the 4th grade class between 2 teachers. And thankfully, my husband and I wrote to the principal's boss to see if they could, analyze the classroom ratio, but they were saying that the classroom ratio after 3rd grade, it's like they don't care anymore. And I'm wondering how we can change that as advocates or parents for students. Like what, do we have to speak to lawmakers regarding that? I mean, our tax dollars, like how does that work?
The State Board of Education does pay attention, and we are concerned about the class size issue, and it appeared in legislation last year. I think it was last year, and received a lot of attention. And there was, I will say, there was a fair amount of angst around that piece of legislation, because we know that class size matters. I mean, if we could have a situation in North Carolina where we had the ratio 1 teacher to 15 students would truly make a difference, or 1 teacher to 10 students in the lower grades, or wouldn't that be great? I don't know that that will happen in my lifetime. Makes a difference. There has been some research over the years. I haven't kept up and followed the trail of research, but the body of research that I'm most familiar with goes back maybe 15, 20 years ago, and it said it really doesn't matter if you reduce it by 1 or 2 students. Like it goes, let's say we go from 1, start it from 1 to 25 and tinker with it and get it in legislation to 1 to 21. Not a significant difference. It makes a major difference if you're going to drop that ratio by 10 students. So to answer your question, it does. Oddly, I don't know the assumption behind it, but I know the ratio, there's a smaller ratio in the lower grades, and it does increase, I think maybe in grades 3, 4, and 5 and up. But the assumption, it's just kind of a strange false assumption. The assumption is, oh, well, a teacher can handle more students as they get older. Well, no, not at all. Not at all. What I would recommend that you do is start at the local level.
Well, we did, and they decided that they are gonna hire, I guess they monitored the class for 10 days, and then they were gonna hire another 4th
That
grade
happens.
teacher. And now they're in the process of hiring another 4th grade teacher, but so we have to wait. And so the science department got split up, so I was just wondering at some point, I mean, parents have to stand up and be like, listen,
You really
this
do.
this is ridiculous
This is all
because my
legislation.
kid is gonna fall in between the cracks if I don't step up and help him studying or whatever.
You know,
And our principals pay attention to that. The first 10 days mean a lot, that first 10-day report, because after that report comes into Raleigh, then somewhere in this building, you have a lot of data people taking a look at the numbers and working with the local school superintendents, who and then will work with the principals to say, okay, your school, that your elementary school needs a couple more teachers. It's not as easy as you think, because what happens at the principal level, and it's usually passed off to the assistant principal, you've got to find space for those teachers. So you've got to rearrange the school in some way. You've got to move fourth grade, third grade someplace, and to make room for another classroom. Sometimes it means bringing in a mobile unit. It's almost like a domino effect. When you make one little move, then a lot of moving parts come into play. But that should not prevent the school system or the school or the state from providing the resources to hire that extra, or maybe 2 extra teachers, to get the class size more in a reasonable ratio. So, and it's all about getting the class size in a reasonable ratio so that teacher will have time to do great things with kids in a small group setting, in one-to-one settings, and even whole class settings. Yes, but to answer your question, we do. The State Board of Education pays attention to that. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Now we have Dr. Michael Wells. He is the Director of Federal Programs Monitoring and Support Division, and he will provide us Title VI information and updates. Thank you for being here, Dr. Wells.
Thank you, Dr. Locklear. I'm happy to be here. In fact, this is my last official act at DPI. I'm retiring today. Sorry? Well, and I actually had the offer to have someone else do this, and I said, no, this is a good finish for me to be able to talk to this group. I've been at the department for a little over a year. Prior to that, I was 14 years at the U.S. Department of Education, and one of the things I really enjoyed doing there was liaison between the Office of State Support and the Office of Indian Education. Visited a number of reservations out west, went to the Indian Education Conference a number of years. So it's an area that I really have a lot of interest in and is really close to my heart. So I was glad to come and talk to you folks. Shortly after I got to the Department of Public Instruction a little over a year ago, and looking at federal programs, and that's the primary thing that our office does look at, is trying to get money to schools and districts from the federal government to pass it through to the folks who need it down in the school districts and in the schools. One of the things that I noticed there was several new provisions in the Every Student Succeeds Act, some of which had not yet been implemented in North Carolina. So I began to look through those, and one of them had to do with the consultation requirements around the Title VI grant funds. Now, those funds don't come through our office. They actually go directly to the school district from Title VI. But one of the things that does happen that's in connection with that is that if a school district or a school gets Title VI funds, it obligates them to do some level of consultation with the tribal entities and authorities that are in their community before getting any other federal grant dollars, not just the Indian education dollars. And that had not been followed previously in North Carolina. So while I was searching out what was going on and what the practice had been and looking at what the law required, at the same time, your report came out, and some of your folks from last year, and you did a presentation to the board. It was one of my first board meetings. And in that report, you mentioned I think it was 18 different counties or districts that were receiving these Title VI funds, and that about half of them had not had this consultation piece that was required. So Dr. Petrie Martin at that point contacted me and said, what do you know about this? And I said, ironically enough, I am working on that now, trying to figure out how we can address that. So we were able to get hand in hand, and your report last year was an impetus for us to get that moving. It helped me to have a little wind at my back and moving it along, so I'm happy that happened. So one of the things that we did, and what you see on the screen there, is we have a comprehensive improvement plan, comprehensive continued improvement plan that is online, that all of our districts and charter schools have to complete in order to receive the federal funds that come through our office. And that includes Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, Part A and B, lots of grant funding that comes through. And it also includes that they, in this application, tell us what their goals are, what their plans are, and what the activities that are going to be associated with each one of those grant funds are. So the very first page, and that's what you're seeing here, is the requirement where they have to indicate to us how they have managed to interact with and engage with the different stakeholders that they're required to interact with. So one of the things that I did on this application, because not everybody is required to do the last one where it says other, only those who get those Title VI funds or have more than 50% of their student body that are American Indians. If those individuals have either one of those situations, then they have to check that box as well. And they were just being told previously that they had to have some tribal consultation. Well, many of the districts had interpreted that as, we had a parent meeting and one of our parents was an American Indian, so we checked the box, we did that. Well, we certainly want you to engage in parents if you're a school district or a charter school. We want you to engage with them in every opportunity you can and engage with them a lot. And I'm using the word engagement rather than involvement or inclusion or some of the other words that we sometimes hear. And the reason is that engagement and consultation have a very specific meaning at the federal level. It means that you're including those individuals from the beginning of discussions around your planning, that there is an opportunity to contribute to the discussion around needs assessment, to react to needs that have been set up by others in the planning process, that you have input into what the goals ought to be and the plans ought to be in addressing those needs, and to react to those that others bring to the table. It's not about, here's our plan, what do you think? It's about, help us plan. And so it should be a consultation in that way, and the office is very explicit about that at the federal level, but that hadn't been happening at the state level in many of our districts. And I don't know that it was any kind of ill will necessarily, more of a lack of understanding, I hope, and I tend to go there as a default. Let's help you correct your mistake rather than thinking that someone did something with ill intent. So we added the word leadership here because the requirement is not that you have parent meetings that include someone who is an American Indian in it. As important as that is, that's not enough. You have to engage with the official tribal authority of the tribe that has the most representation in your school district or in your school. That can be the chief or the president or the whatever the recognized executive authority is for that tribe, or it can be someone that's designated by that individual or by a leading council. It can be an education council if there's one set up in that particular tribal structure, as long as the executive authority suggests that that's your designated contact point. So I've had a lot of conversation with districts. We had regional meetings last year, just before it was time to begin to fill out these applications. And as I said, it's very, very lengthy. But on page 1 is where they start with this documentation that they're doing this required consultation. So they must indicate that. We added the word leadership to make sure they know that that's there. We talked with them about that. I've had phone calls with all 18 districts to make sure that they know what the requirements are. Then they have to tell us when the meetings were held, and they have to give us some indication of who they met with. If they don't do that, they will not get their federal funds, any federal funds, Title I, Title II, any of those. And this will be the first year that that's being implemented.
That's great.
To our next slide. These are the districts that you identified for us, and we were able to verify that through other sources that we had at the U.S. Department of Education as well, that are the districts that we are requiring that consultation from this year. Some of those have been doing fine with that, and they know what they're doing, and they continue to do that. Others are not. I was out at Halawasaponi Tribal School last week and spent a full day there, which was a wonderful day with that school and the folks who are working there. They've got this down pat. They know it. It's just a reflex for them. So is Robertson County. Some of the other counties are doing that in a way that's appropriate. Again, some of the counties that are not necessarily focused in that area, so Charlotte-Mecklenburg, for example, thought they were doing the right thing. They had a new person in place, and I was able to talk with her and make sure that she had everything taken care of before the actual plan was made. So they're going consultation there as well. So that's our largest, one of our largest districts. Cumberland as well has made some changes in how they're doing it. So we're hoping that we're going to get more input from the Native American students and parents, as well as from the tribal organizations in the application process for how our schools are dealing with these federal funds that are coming in to support high poverty, low performing schools going forward. In addition to saying you have to do it and help them understanding how they document that, we also wanted to, as I was mentioning earlier, explain to them what tribal consultation is. It's not, want you to come in so we can tell you what our plans are. It's bringing them in from the beginning to be involved in building the plan, identifying the needs, discussing how those needs need to be met. Now, there's not a veto for anybody in those stakeholder groups. They can't go, you're not satisfying us, so you can't do it. But certainly you want to be at the table, and certainly you want to be able to bring your issues and your concerns and the areas that are particularly concerned to your identified group, if you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you're a businessman, so that you can bring those to the table, and the Native American individuals and the tribes that are representing those folks should be at the table with that same level. Dr. Oxendine talks about equity. It's one of the things that I really have been happy to see a much more robust conversation around, and it's on the table whether we see it written there or not. It's on the table for every discussion with the school board and many of our discussions in terms of our planning. In fact, we are about to engage in a revision and an update of our Every Student Succeeds Act state plan, and one of the watchwords we're looking for as we do that is equity. So I think this is a way to bring that about. The next thing we have to talk about with folks is the difference between equity and equal. Mm-hmm. Treating everybody the exact same way is not equity. Mm-hmm. And the example I use when I talk to folks about that is, if you have a student in your classroom who is blind or visually impaired and you treat everybody equally, they get the same textbooks every other kid gets. But if you're using equity as your guide work, then that student gets what they need to give them an equal chance at being able to succeed. And that may mean they get a Braille book, or they get a large print book. Everybody doesn't get one, but people get what they need to be able to perform at a level that is on par with everybody else. If they need extra support, they need to get that extra support. That's what equity is. It's not about everybody treated the same way. So that must happen. It must be with the tribal organization. And that was a hard one for some folks. They weren't sure who they were going to go to. We helped them find out who that was. And also they have to document the dates of the meeting and the role of the attendees. Are they part of the executive leadership in that particular tribe, or more than one tribe if that's the case? And lastly, this is from the electronic application process for Indian Education Office, and it talks about the different kinds of consultation and the different kinds of interaction that has to happen from depending on what the situation is in the district, whether or not they have a Title VI grant or not, whether or not they have a large number of American Indian students in a school or in a district, and what the requirements are for that. It basically reiterates what I said, but it's from the federal government and it's from the Indian Education Office. So anybody who's applying for those grants see this now, so they know the consultation that they're required to include. So I wanted to bring that to you to let you know that we're getting on track, that we're trying to meet all the requirements, that we are committed to making sure that that happens. Every district that I talked to about this either said, yes, sir, we are doing that, or, my gosh, I'm sorry, we will do it from now on. We didn't know what we were supposed to do. Nobody said they thought it was a bad idea, or that it was too hard, or that it shouldn't happen. Everybody agreed, absolutely, we'll take care of it. It makes sense. So the good news is that everybody's ready to do this. Now they know what they're supposed to. So there should be a lot more input in the applications that we're now receiving right now My staff are reviewing those as they come in on a day-to-day basis to send out this year's federal grants. Any questions I can answer for anyone?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Thank you so much for that presentation, especially focusing on consultation. Go back and remind me or help me understand the approach that is used in our urban settings, such as Charlotte Mac. The consultation would be with whom?
It would be with whoever the executive leadership person, be it a chief or a president or whatever, in the tribal organization that represents the tribe that is represented by the most students in the district. Yes.
Representation.
Now they can meet with more than one, and Wake County meets with more than one, and I don't know which tribes they meet with, but they did tell me they met with more than one. They are required to meet with the one that has the largest representation in their schools, but they can certainly meet with others if they want to, and many of them do.
That has always been the question mark that I've had around the consultation approach for the urban centers.
And it's not always easy, and Dr. Silver has helped us with some of that to identify, and sometimes we've talked with neighboring communities that have a large presence of Native Americans in their community that says, do you know who is the person we should talk with in Charlotte or in Greensboro or wherever it is? And sometimes it is someone that's actually living outside the county that we're talking about, but still represents that tribal organization that those folks are have membership in. And we still bring those into that county to talk about what's happening in that particular county for those students.
And another piece to that would be, it would be important that whoever is serving in the executive leadership position in a Robinson County, it would, I suppose, be the tribal chair.
Right.
That they share that back with, let's say, a tribal council or their board of directors, so that everyone is aware of it. In other words, the information about consultation just doesn't begin and end with 2 or 3 parties.
Well, and another piece of the consultation and with those other groups would, for instance, with the parent groups, with the business organizations in the community, with the faith community, those stakeholders that need to be involved in these consultations as well in these communities, in order to talk with them about these are the other consultations we're having. And so they would know who is at the table and maybe even be at this table at the same time. It wouldn't be a one-off in which just the planning team and the tribal representative would be there. It would be a larger group in which that person is at the table with the faith community, the business community, parents, educators, other individuals that are a part of that representative group.
I'd like to add something to that. When the Dear Colleague letter came out in 2016, it stated that there had to be, that those urban communities, if they were in a 100-mile radius of the tribe.
That's right.
Then they came back and they changed that. And they said it was regardless of how far, where you still had to have that tribal consultation.
That's right.
So I will just talk a little bit, as Dr. Otzenine mentioned, about Robinson County. When we had our tribal consultation, we brought in all of the surrounding counties. Everybody was there at one time. Hope, Cumberland, Wake, Scotland, Robinson. Several of us came together, and we presented all of our Title VI programs. And we had the chairman. We had representatives from the tribe as well. And in my county, Isles and Cumberland County, we had representatives from our cabinet, from our district office. Then when in our county, when we got ready to complete the Title I grant, we had an additional meeting and we came back to the table. So this tribal consultation piece is one piece that I know I'm getting ready to go off, but I'm really proud about this piece because I have been talking about this since it came out, because it was worrying some, especially for counties like ours and many of us sitting in here. When you're talking about losing your Title I, and those counties, you would have to close the doors. So without making sure that this is done accurately and with fidelity, we could lose those funds.
That's right.
So that's why it's so important that this is taking place. And the other reason it's so important, and this is what I want to share with us at the table to take back to our tribal leaders. This came about because there were times when Title VI funds were used. What would happen is individuals go back to their community. Some of us I have a large grant in our county. Some individuals have small grants. And they would go back to their county, and it was time especially for the Indian Education Conference, which is one conference that we're kind of expected to be at. And entities were saying, you have Title VI funds, you can use that funds. And basically what came out of that is that's just like saying to the special ed department, you have special ed funds, you can use those funds. That's against the law. So you have staff development funds that are for everybody. And basically what they were saying is that we are not having a voice. You're kicking our people out. You're not allowing them to have a seat at the table when it comes to staff development. And then not only that, our people at one time, individuals, tribal communities were coming to districts saying, we want to know more about our children and how this is impacting our children. And they were not having a voice. The legislation came down from Washington, and now we have a voice. So I want to encourage tribal leaders to not just say, okay, we're meeting and we're going to sign off on this. Have your voice. This is the first time in a long time that we've had this voice, and we need that for our children. We need that. There's an opportunity for us to sit at the table, and I say us, I mean our tribal leaders, to sit at the table and have a voice as it relates to the education of our children. And that's how this came about. And so it's so important that everybody understands that this just doesn't apply to Title VI funds. Like there was a time when individuals would say, well, we don't want to sign off on that grant anymore. We don't have to have it. Well, it just doesn't apply to Title VI. It
right.
applies to Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, Title V. And
$651 million in North Carolina.
Yes, and that's a lot of money. That's why a lot of states, like I think it was Washington State and Wyoming and Oklahoma, they have hired individuals just to focus on tribal consultation at the district office because they don't want to lose this large amount of money, and it's big. And so I'm just excited that this is coming. So when I got the phone call a couple of months ago from Dr. Wells and Dr. Martin, I was like, "Ooh, this is coming down the pipeline. This is working." So this is exciting for me. So thank you, Doc. Anybody else have any more comments or conversations?
And let me just add, if I can, to what you were just saying, that I think we can be very proud of our North Carolina folks. Richard Burr was one of the people who helped to push this piece into the legislation. North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Montana were the three states who insisted that be in the new law when it was written. So that's what's helping put a little backbone in this. You're absolutely right that it's important to get this done because a lot of money can be lost and schools could close down or certainly not function as well, as you say, without the money. On the other hand, by saying you don't get all these big dollars if you don't do this, we're saying this is important. It has a lot of weight. It has a serious consequence. And if there was no serious consequence to it, then people wouldn't take it seriously. They're taking it seriously now, and I think that's a good thing.
Thank you so much. Any more questions?
I just wanted to take a minute before Dr. Wells leaves to publicly acknowledge him and Dr. Einstein, 'cause I want to share a little bit around this because I think this council sometimes doesn't understand its value. This came about because Dr. Locklear kept pushing on this and then mentioned it when she did the SACIE report, which set off a chain of events. We had been having this conversation and all this angst around the tribal consultation, and I took it to my director thinking I'm going to get what I've always gotten, which is just like, okay, we'll take care of that later. But Dr. Peter Martin got involved, who then called Dr. Wells, and we sat down and had a conference call, and he went to work, like in a way that previous directors hadn't gone to work on this issue, and reached out to districts and helped create an understanding of that. So these two folks drove that, and that was kicked off by this council. Mm-hmm. And so this council needs to recognize its importance and its value and when it can push issues. And I want to thank you, Dr. As you're going out the door.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work on
I
it.
can tell you that since I am leaving, my folks in my division know this is important. It will continue to be important.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. We really do appreciate it.
And if I might add,
Dr. Einstein, you had
just
something?
a couple seconds, and the way I learned.
Dr. Wells?
He's off and running.
He's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
It's just you're in a hurry to leave, aren't you?
No, actually, I wanted to get some of my staff.
Well, listen, I'm not going to keep you, but 2 seconds. This is the way state board members learn about people leaving. Actually, that's fine. That's quite all right. That's just part of the way things happen. But I have so appreciated. I don't know you that well, but I know you mainly because you come to the mic occasionally and speak to the state board, and you always do such a gracious job and a very thorough job. So wherever you're going, just know that on behalf of the State Board of Education, I'm one that wishes you all the best. And I'm so pleased to hear about the consultation initiative moving forward, and thanks to both of you and Dr. Silver and Dr. Petrie Martin. And I hope that that's going to be a highlight that is discussed at our state board meeting in the spring.
Yes.
Because I can sense it's big. I can. It's marvelous.
It is big.
Marvelous.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. We have a few minutes, and we're going to have lunch at 12. Is it okay if I go ahead and jump into my report at this time? Or do you want to go ahead and have lunch?
It's here, but it's up to you.
Okay, I think we'll go ahead, and that way we can have lunch, and maybe if we have a few minutes to get ahead of Friday's traffic, that will be okay? Is that fine with everybody? Oh, y'all are not complaining about that?
The traffic's already
There's no
there.
traffic on Fridays, Dr. Lockley. Apparently, everybody in Raleigh works from home. Like Friday traffic is easy breezy.
Okay.
Well, in the morning anyway. I don't know about that.
I just have a couple of items that I would like to discuss. One of them is, I just have to go back to that tribal consultation. I'm so excited about that. That's just, that thrills me because there were times when we didn't have a voice, and now we have that voice. And I say that's the reason a lot of times when we have the opportunity to be here at SACIE, I know we have a lot that goes on in our lives. We have a lot that's happening, and there are times we can't be here. But I just hope that we do take this role very seriously because we don't want to lose our seat. We don't want to lose this this board. And we fought so hard to be here. And whether, pardon me, I don't mean this to sound negative. I just don't know how that may be the correct way to say it. But when we're not here, others are listening and seeing that, and then they begin to assume that this board is not viable and it's not important. And I don't ever want that to be seen that way. I want us to be here as much as possible. And I'm very much aware that we have children and things happen, but when we can, it's so important for us to be here at the table, pushing for our American Indian children. So with that being said, thank all of you for being here. And I know my time's about up, and I'm getting a little disappointed about that, but I know I'm going to leave it in good hands over here, everybody. But a couple pieces I want to talk to you is I received, this goes back to our module that's been developed. I received an email this week from, well, I'm not going to say exactly where it came from, but it was sent to a high official, let's say it like that, much higher than my county. And that person sent it to me because they knew I was with SACIE. And this was a PowerPoint that was produced in a class. Teacher shared with the students. And the student took a picture of one of the slides. And this, I'm going to read to you what was on this slide, and then I want you to tell me why this parent and student are really upset. And we want to address it from this area. Lumbee lived in the Piedmont Intercoastal Plain, thought to absorb some of the colonists from Roanoke. The triracial, Native African and European, not federally recognized. Hog killing is a social neighborhood event to bring everyone together. They do not have a reservation or sovereignty rights like other Indian tribes. They're governed by a tribal council and chairman, but this leadership is unofficial as far as the U.S. government is concerned. And many Lumbee people are dissatisfied with this situation and are working to change it. That's what the teacher presented to the student. Now, if that's not disrespectful, I mean, that was very upsetting. This came from a classroom. And so I told the person that sent it to me that I have no jurisdiction. It's not in my county, it's in another county, in this county. But I did recommend that they speak to the chairman and let him address it with the superintendent of that particular school. And the other couple of tribes that they mentioned were very, the information was not as disrespectful. It was listed in a very different way. And what I said to some individuals lately, I spoke to a group of teachers, and when we discredit a child's culture, we discredit that child. We discredit their ancestors. We discredit everybody that has fought for these children to have rights. And when we discredit their culture, we're taking away everything that they know and about who they are. So to me, this was very disrespectful, very upsetting and hurtful to me, and more hurtful to me that it was produced to children, a middle school child. So that is why I want us as individuals to stress the importance to our communities and take this back, and this can go back to the Commission of Indian Affairs to share with our tribal leaders, that we need to address from that tribal consultation piece that these counties are ensuring that there's some type of culturally responsive training going on within their districts. They can use that module. They can bring different people in. They can have some. You can come in as a tribal leader and have some type of tribal culturally responsive instruction. That is not, and we're here talking about our American Indian children, but that goes for every ethnicity. When we discredit who they are, we are just killing that child in their spirit. And so this child took a picture of this, took it home to his mom. His mom sent it to an individual, and I don't want to call the name of the school or that, but I just think this goes back. This right here is why we sit at this table. This right here is why we need to be at this table, because this was so disrespectful. I'm not going to call the other tribe that they listed, but they listed this group, and they said government consists of tribal council chiefs who were elected by mothers of the tribe, and everything they listed about that particular tribe was very friendly. But when they spoke of the Lumbee, when you talk about that we have no sovereign rights like other Indian tribes, that's a complete stab. And then when you talk about the chairman and the tribal council in our government, that's another stab. And then when you talk about the only social event we have is hog killing, that's another stab. I mean, this is so disrespectful, and there's just so many things in here. So going back to that tribal consultation piece, that's why we need to have conversations with our districts, with our leaders, with our superintendents, so that we can have, so this is not happening to our children. Had another phone call, and for some reason my name's on SACIE, so people from all out of counties, they're calling me. Had another phone call. The child stated in class that he was Indian. And the teacher looked at him and said, "No, you're not, you're white." And said it very disrespectful. And the child's mom is Caucasian. The child's dad is American Indian. He's Lumbee. And the child's dad is Alevian. So he calls someone, and someone tells him I'm on SACIE, and they call me. So that's another reason for that module. I'm just adding more credibility to why culturally responsive instruction is so vital and so important to who we are as people and to our children. We are adults. We have been raised in our cultural communities, and now we know who we are. But when you're talking to elementary and middle and even some of your high school students, we're killing their spirit. And the research says that we are relationship people. And relationships are important to all children, but they're extremely vital for children of color. And when you kill that child's spirit, you can forget about teaching them. You can forget about that. So those are a couple pieces I wanted to bring out. I want to add something that Mr. Richardson said, and he was talking about tribal enrollment. We are running into a lot of situations in our districts, and I know this is not just mine, but sometimes our children get to high school and they realize that they don't have their tribal enrollment number. And they're getting ready to apply for scholarships, and guess what's required? That tribal enrollment number. So going back to your communities, encourage your encourage parents and our children to start early with that tribal enrollment number, because what's happening in some areas, tribes are closed, tribal enrollments are closed, and it's hard for them to get those numbers, and therefore they're sitting there not being able to apply for the scholarship that they're eligible for because they don't have a tribal enrollment number. And the other piece with that is 506 forms. Those of us that are directors or Indian education coordinators, on that form it states that we need that child's tribal enrollment number. Then it says other, or it says tribal enrollment number, or is what it says. And that's other proof that states that that child's American Indian. A couple years ago, when they came to visit me and to look at my documentation, I'm talking about the Office of Indian Education in Washington, that other part, we have to remind her that after that, or you have to have that, if you don't put a tribal enrollment number, that other piece has to be completed. And what that piece entails is what verification, if we don't have a tribal enrollment number, what verification would the Saponi tribe use to show that this child would be considered Saponi? And it could be that child's birth certificate that says, or that mom's tribal enrollment number, or the dad's tribal enrollment number. So make sure that those pieces are filled out. So that goes back to what Mr. Richardson was saying. Also, going back to what I said earlier, these two pieces I talked about earlier goes right back to what when you were talking, and I've made some notes here. Educate our state citizens about American Indian tribes. So that PowerPoint or that slide goes right back to that. And the other piece I like to share with you is that I am going to present at the National Indian Education Conference. They approved my proposal, and I will be presenting on bringing STEM opportunities to our indigenous populations, and just talking about that and how we can bring STEM opportunities. And STEM is my background is math, so STEM is very important to me. And right now, there's it's like our STEM jobs are increasing at a rate of 33 to 50%, and we don't have a lot of our American Indian students in those areas, so we need them there. There's a lot of changes that are taking place in our nation, and the only way we're going to have a seat at the table is we have to have the educational background, and a lot of those areas are in STEM. So we want to talk about bringing STEM opportunities, and as I'm talking about that, this summer, GlaxoSmithKline gave us a summer PD for our students for free. They came to Robeson County. They brought Moorhead Planetarium from Chapel Hill, and we had 100 students at this event, and they did all these STEM activities. They brought everything. The kids became scientists. They were able to do all these ones. So I've been partnering with them, partnering with Moorhead Planetarium, and that's what I would like to share with you. A lot of STEM activities that I have for our district, I don't fork out any funding for that. Partnerships. So we have formed those partnerships with GlaxoSmithKline. If you're not aware of this, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, they have an educational team. They'll come to your district for free and provide STEM services for you. You have to reach out to them. A lot of your universities, they have to provide so many hours of community service. We have several of them that come over to our office, Dr. Mangini, several more professors that come from UNCP and from Chapel Hill. We have Dr. Ryan Emanuel that comes from NC State. He took a group of our kids, we took a bunch of them down to the Lumbee River, and he showed them how to test the water and taught them about environmental science and why it's important. And all of that goes back to who we are. As American Indian, indigenous people, what's important to us? Our land. Our earth is important to us. And so he taught to them a lot about how to protect Mother Earth. And you know, going back to STEM, we talk about STEM like it's new. It's not new to us. We were building long houses and before the word architect ever came out. We were participating in medicine before they gave us the MD. You know, we've been doing these things all along, so this isn't new to us. How many of us know someone right now in our community that can almost fix anything that has no degree? I tell my husband he's a shade tree mechanic. He can do just about anything. And we have figured out how to do this for years. STEM is not new to us. We've been doing this. It's just new to other ethnicities, maybe, but not new to us. But so I want to talk about bringing those pieces. Once again, the other piece, and I don't know if we have a little bit of time, but I'm going to jump into this while Mia's here. I've been working with Dr. Oxendine and with Mia. I have us a location for our educational summit.
Oh.
We have been working together, and we're able to utilize the Greensboro site, and she has the site, and all we're going to do is after lunch, we need a date, and we need to see if we can get it together.
I really, and as we talked the last time, and we're going to have more time to talk about that in a little bit, but just be thinking about this during lunch. That educational summit goes back to that tribal consultation. It goes back to the information I shared with you earlier. I don't know about you, but I'm going to tell you, the more I read that slide, the more angry I became.
Sure.
And I was just like, I can't believe this. I mean, the fact, I'm an adult. You can say things to me, but when we say it to children, when we say it to children, we're hurting our children. And then we wonder why everybody wants to talk about where our scores are with our American Indian. We are killing their spirit. We are killing them. We're telling them that they're not important. We're telling them their ancestors are not important. We're telling them their culture is not important. And what do? They shut down. It's not that they're less smart than anybody else, and it's not that they don't have the cognitive ability. We've got to do better. So that's my speech, and I'm going to stop to have some lunch. I'm sorry, Doc.
If I may, I'd like to have a sidebar conversation with you about that school and that situation with that slide, because we can't afford to let that go. And there's got to be some investigation of that particular matter. And so I'd like to get with you and get some more details about that, because from my perspective, that teacher should not be in the classroom. We're in a situation in this country where there's school shootings all over the place and students are dying because of various things. And for me, hearing that could be the very trigger that could cause, a real serious problem and could end up in lives being taken. So I think it's more than that person needing some diversity training. There's something else going on. I think there's perhaps an agenda there. So I'd like to know more about that, and I'd like to get information and details so that we can have a discussion at the Indian Commission about where we need to go with that. I'm pleased to hear that you're presenting at NIA. That's another thing that we are still working on. Sometimes it's hard to get our professional people. We have people with doctor's degrees, law degrees, can speak at these conferences. And I'll be going to the NCAI conference, National Congress of American Indians conference, next month. And that's one thing that I've been really questioning with them, because very rarely is there a person from a state recognized tribe on the agenda to introduce a speaker, to say a prayer, or to lead a workshop. And I think that's not good. So I've made that issue aware with our area VP of the southeastern region, and I'm hoping that we're going to have someone on that agenda. We'll wait and see. If not, we're going to continue to have that discussion, because it's really not fair to have a national organization where so many of our state recognized tribes send representatives to, and we not have even anyone to introduce a speaker, say a prayer, or anything. Shouldn't let it happen.
Thank you.
So would you be willing to share
I will.
information to me about that incident?
I'll speak with you.
Thank you.
I want to piggyback on that, because this same kind of situation just happened with me personally, and with my son's classroom. And Tucker is in 8th grade at Mills Park Middle School, Cary, Western Cary. He's one of 2 Native American students in the school that I know of. And I taught the other child who's there now. He's a 6th grader. Tucker's an 8th grader. And he comes home and has a test that we always help him study with for social studies. And the test is on Native Americans. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're not learning about Lumbee? Like, that's my first question. And wait a minute, where's the other tribes? It's only speaking about 4, which really aren't 4 tribes in North Carolina. So I sort of posted something on social media about it with his study guide. And I'm like, something's not lining up. Where's the rest of it? And the only thing I still need to sit down with the teacher, but the only thing I can think is it's as the Europeans came to here. It dates back to then. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, is something on CMAP that I'm missing? Because I have the privilege to go onto CMAP and to look at that and to look at 8th grade. One of my friends who is a Wake County school board member sent me a message off, who I'm friends with, sent me a message off Facebook, and she's like, you know, what's the information? I'm on CMAP looking, I don't see anything, and I'm like, well, I don't see anything either, what they're supposed to be learning about, where is she getting her information, this, that, and the other. So the same type of situation just happened somewhat with me, with my son, where the teacher's teaching, and you're leaving out really all 8 tribes. You're not speaking of the 8 tribes, you're speaking of, you know, 4 somewhat tribes, Tuscarora, Catawba, Cherokee, and Algonquin, which isn't even a tribe. You know, so it's, where are they getting the information? It's not on CMAP. It's not in their curriculum to teach. So where are you getting it and why are you teaching it? So, same situation. Where I want to find out. And I do have the privilege as an educator to go on because I can get right to CMAP at any grade I want to look at and look at it. And, you know, it's, as my son's sitting in class, I'm like, well, Tucker, did you ask? And he would never open his mouth and ask, you know, why are we not learning about Lumbee? Because I'm Lumbee. But I do want to sit down with the teacher and find out, you know, what, or are you going to teach? You know, are you working through the years and it's going to come up? Mm-hmm. So, sort of the same situation in the classroom.
One of the things that I would recommend you consider is perhaps the SACIE forming maybe a work committee, a task force, a small, you know, little task committee of some size to develop things like PowerPoint and call it, publicize it as SACIE approved or SACIE endorsed. And you can make available on the SACIE website PowerPoint and other types of materials, digital materials that are approved and endorsed by SACIE. And that way, our public school educators, when they're ready to do units around American Indians, they can go to that website and they can feel confident that they are using material that SACIE approves. Mm-hmm. That's something I would certainly consider, especially PowerPoints. Mm-hmm. And you know, during the month of November, across the state, a lot will be going on around the theme of American Indians. So just to have some PowerPoints available, maybe not this year, but next year.
I think there needs to be a way as well, and this is speaking from an educator. I think there needs to be a way as well, because I know we have the module now. But if I'm not in that school pushing that module, teachers don't know about it. Mm-hmm. Like, there's so much professional development, and there's so many classes, and there's so much time that you don't have to sit in front of a computer for 10 hours to learn a new module. People don't know about it.
Well, let me tell you what
And
we're
I don't
doing
know
in
how
our
it's
county as it
pushed.
relates to the module. You know, we have the Project 3C grant with the Lumbee tribe, and so that's a STEM initiative. So we had the training with the science teachers. Now we're doing training with the math teachers. What we're doing with the teachers is that we have developed a course in Canvas that the teachers will go in to complete their training to get prepared for the professional development they'll receive on the math. But the tribe this training is going to give them supplies and resources for their classroom. But before they can participate in that training, they have to bring a printout where they have completed that module. Because at the end, when you complete it, it'll say select for your certificate. They have to bring their certificate with them. So that's a requirement. But once again, I know that can't happen all the time, but we on this committee, we have to be a voice. Going back to that educational summit, bringing your tribal leaders in, telling your tribal leaders when they're meeting with the superintendents, when they're getting ready to sign up, as you heard Dr. Wells say, this is not about, here's my paperwork, you sign it. This is about having conversation. So if I'm sitting at that tribal consultation meeting, I might say, this is something that the tribe would like to see happen in Robeson County. That all of your teachers, especially your new teachers that are coming into the state and not aware of the culture, or just say a requirement, all of your teachers to complete this module. That could be something that tribal leaders could say, we would like to see that in your plan. So that is something, that is a way that can be addressed, especially with these 18 counties that are required, or these 18 entities, school districts that are required. That is one way. Then the other way is we as members of SACIE, we just have to keep pushing it. I know as Dr. Oxenden said multiple times, when we start writing this manual, we can't say must or they have to do. We make recommendations. And then it's totally left up to the school district and so forth. But if we have this tribal consultation meeting, then tribal leaders can say to the school district leaders, this is what we would like to see. And that's going to be a larger driving force too. As the state board we put those in there, we give them to to the state board, and we make the recommendations. But as it's been said, as Dr. Artson said multiple times, we can make recommendations. But there's some, we can't force. But this tribal consultation opens up a little bit more leeway for that. Any more comments or questions? I didn't mean to open a can of worms, but it was important to bring it to the light. If not, we can break for lunch. Do you have any directions for us, Dr. Silver?
So we're going to go right through that door that has the Wi-Fi code on it, and it's Panera today. Miss Donna Murray, who's our next presenter, is already in the room, so if we could be ready to start back promptly at 12:30 so we can honor her time. So take a break, grab your lunch, and come back, and then we'll be ready to start right at 12:30 so we can get her.
Good to see you. This is all good. I gotta get out of here now and get back and catch up.
Yeah, I want to see it.
That's absolutely crazy. That teacher's
And you're going to figure out exactly why this is written like this. I'll go up and show you the other ones was the cutoff.
Just have to be persistent. That is an age.